Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman, I'm your streamer. We work on a software as a service that I develop in my spare time and look at Python and the Django web framework. I've been working on a project to clean up deployment, and so we're going to jump right into that today. And the process of cleaning up this deployment is to dramatically shrink down the number of steps that are in the deployment so that my deploys will be safer, they'll be faster, all of that stuff. And we've been doing a lot of work to do that. A lot of that has been bundling up the application into a single file called a Shiv app and replacing a lot of stuff in the process and cleaning up some Ansible stuff. And we're at the tail end of this. So let's look at the milestone that I built around this so that you can follow along. The thing that I'm going to be working on tonight is this issue right here about removing the git clone. In my original deployment strategy, and I'll just hold on a second, let me drop the issue here. That's what we're working on. Okay, just getting a couple notes up there in case anybody joins them later. So let's talk about what the site is, I guess, for just a moment, and give you an idea of what we're doing and what it's for. And then we'll dig into how that's been deployed in the past and how we're going to change it. So I work on this side project called College Conductor. It's about working with college admissions counselors. The domain is not really like important for this stream. What is important is that this is a Django application, and it's powered by Python, of course, because Django is a Python web framework. And we just go through how does this site get produced and actually put on the internet. So we're working through deployment, as I mentioned, and my old deployment process was basically to do a git clone on the server. So install git, do a git clone, pull down all the code from my repository, which is publicly available if you want to go check it out. It's at mblayman/conductor, and put that on there and run everything directly from a clone. This has some not ideal properties to it, like doing updates in place, and is a part of why I wanted to change. So the plan tonight is to take this out because we've spent all this time switching off of this git clone to use a packaged format that is managed totally differently. The package is built in continuous integration on Circle CI. It's pushed up to S3, and then the deployment process is not doing a pull on the git clone. It's actually pulling from S3 to start the web server. So that's the short version. So that's what we're going to be doing. If you want to follow along, like there's links above that you can follow me on Twitter. If you have any questions that you want to ask me, I have a website up there. And in fact, today I just published a very long article about this tool, which is called Shiv, as an alternative to Docker. So if you want to read up on that and all of the details of how I did that, in case you don't have time to go back and view past streams, you're welcome to do that. I got a mailing list and YouTube and all that stuff. So if you like what you see, give me a follow or a like, whatever it is, depending on where you're coming from, whether that's YouTube or Twitch. And I would totally appreciate it. It helps me get seen by more people. So let's jump right into the task at hand. I've kind of outlined the basic steps that are going to be needed, and we will go from there. And frankly, it's been a while since I've looked at this, so I don't have totally fresh eyes like you might, but I'm certainly not at a spot where this is completely right in my memory either. So let's open up Vim and take a look at what's going on. I use Ansible for doing deployments. Ansible is a really common tool. It works by basically from my machine making an SSH connection to where I deploy and pushing some code over there, running that code to do some stuff, whether that's setting up ports or installing stuff or restarting services. All of that stuff runs over on the remote machine itself. And then when it's done, it deletes those temporary code files that it pushed over, terminates the SSH connection. So that's how Ansible, the tool that I use, works. So we're going to be spending most of our time tonight looking at Ansible and looking at the tasks that go along with that. I think they're officially called plays because the Ansible project has like this sports kind of analogy of dealing with playbooks, like in football or something like that. So, that's just the naming, the nomenclature. But the idea is it's a YAML file, and each one of these blocks that is in a list, like I'm showing here, is something that Ansible will execute. So what we need to do is find the git clone of my project, which is somewhere around here. Yeah, it's right here. So fetch from GitHub. This is the thing that we're going to try and remove today. There are a bit of complications to this removal process that we have to work through. The big thing is related to how I'm installing the latest version of my application. So when I created a new application bundle in continuous integration, or wrote the scripts to do that, I guess it would be more accurate, I created a version that was tagged by the git SHA of whatever commit that was. And that's a way to make sure that I get the latest release, so that when I'm doing deployment, you can see actually right here that the thing it's deploying from is in this in the college conductor bucket, and it's looking in this apps kind of directory within that bucket and trying to find a specific file name that matches conductor dash whatever the git SHA is .pyz. So critically, what is important about that is that I have to be able to maintain the ability to get this git SHA. If I don't have that, I'm toast, because I can't actually pull the latest file from S3. So that's going to be critical. The way that it's happening right now is I'm getting that as a side effect of doing an update on the Git repository. So this step right here is doing presumably a git pull. Maybe it's doing a git fetch. I'm not really positive what it's doing under the cover. Doesn't really matter. But the story is that it is making sure that the repository that is on the server is at the latest of whatever exists on the GitHub repo. Okay. And as a side effect of that, if you can see this line here, 82, it says register git fetch. So this git command has a bunch of output, and you can store that. And Ansible's way to store that is using register, saying like, I want to take the output from this command and I want to shove it into this variable that will then be accessible in the future. So it's taking register and putting git fetch, and down here, this dot after attribute. I mean, it's really weirdly named in my opinion. But the dot after attribute is the SHA after the pull. Okay, that's the naming of this. So what we have to be able to do is replace this whole task with an equivalent thing that will get the git SHA. That's important. If we can't do that, then we have real problems, because I need that identifier in order to get the latest version. So that's the task. The other thing that's in here that we need to check on before we can rip this out is checking on app path. I don't remember if anything else gets put in app path. I certainly hope not. Hey, welcome. We're home. I'm not 42. I'm not exactly sure how to say your username, but welcome. If you have any questions, let me know. Happy to answer them. We're doing some stuff to get Git out of my deployment process. So I've got this app path variable that exists in my Ansible playbooks, and yeah, there's some bits that we have to perhaps worry about here. Okay, what's the problem? The problem is if I remove this, then if I were to do a fresh deploy of this whole server, which I may do, we may like take the staging environment and destroy it all because it's just in Vagrant, and then restart the whole thing. If I do that and I don't have this app path, anything that's living at a directory below that is going to have some issues, and those issues will be well, it just won't be able to create files in those directories, which is a problem. So we need to make sure that anything that's using app path is going to point to something else. So let's take a look at each one of these. So this first one here is front-end path. I don't remember what that is. Let's check out where else it's used. Front-end path is defined here as app path / frontend. So the way to read this is, we've got this SRV conductor directory. That's where the git clone is actually going. And then we're creating an extra directory in that git clone called frontend, and then using it for different purposes. And namely, it's being used for this client root variable. And I don't remember how all these things are strung together. Okay, it's related to certificate management. So that's a bit of a problem. We got to figure out how to deal with that and what to do about it. And that's going to be tricky to test too, because certificates are something that I really only need to do from the production environment. The staging environment doesn't need to get a real certificate. So that might be tricky to test. Let's see if there's anything else that uses this front-end stuff. And also, we can check out the staging area, which is it's a virtual machine. We use Vagrant for that. And we can see if the clone that is in the virtual machine it is aware of extra files that have been put there that shouldn't be there. So I'm waiting for the virtual machine to start up. It should just take a second, and then we'll dig into it and look at some files over there. So, the stuff's never quite as easy as you want it to be, right? I've got this sounds like a simple task. Just get rid of the git clone. But then you realize you still have your deployment depending on some stuff that you forgot about. Things that just kind of grew organically over time. Here we are. So let's go to conductor. And if I do a git status on here, okay, it has nothing, but check this out. There's this front end here, front end directory. So that must be in the git ignore. Yeah, of stuff it doesn't care about. If we list the front end, got some stuff in there that is, some of that's controlled files. So maybe all of it's controlled files? That's a good question. It looks like it. As a webpack config, those are definitely things that I would control. So I'm trying to decide why I'm struggling to remember why I made this directory in the first place. I've been running this project kind of as a side project for 2 or 3 years now, and it's gone through a lot of evolution. It actually even started out as a pure Ember application with an API once upon a time, and I stripped all that out, and I've done a bunch of stuff. Hey, thanks for the follow, man. I appreciate it. Or gal. I don't actually know if you're a guy or a gal. Definitely helps out. So anyway, let's dig into what this front-end path is doing. And we see that the only place it's used is by client root. So we need to understand what client root is doing. And I see it in a few places. It looks like it's for storing the certificate as the web root path here. I use Let's Encrypt. So if you're not familiar with Let's Encrypt, it's pretty awesome. It's a service that provides free SSL, or SSL is the old name, TLS certificates. Essentially, what enables you to do HTTPS connections. In the past, in the bad old days, those certificates cost a bunch of money and were kind of a barrier to using a secure connection on stuff. But that's not really the case anymore. So it has been a long time since I set this up. And it was definitely one of those finicky things that once I got it set up, it's like I didn't want to touch it anymore. And here's an important part about this, is like, this is where client's root is being used. So Let's Encrypt is a tool that's installed on the server, and it's asking for a certificate, and it goes through a whole process here and asks for which domains you want the certificate to support, which I have as the root domain, so that's collegeconductor.com, as well as the client domain, which is the, I believe is www.collegeconductor.com. Anyway, you have to be very explicit in that. And then I think the client root is where that certificate is eventually stored by that command. So we have to do some trickery here, because that's where it's going to be stored locally. And I don't remember why I put it there, why I put it in rather than somewhere that's more accessible to Nginx. Because if we go over to this configuration file, now we're staring at a configuration file. And I've got this cryptic comment here. Use a common root with the client for Let's Encrypt. Oh, okay. Wow, how old is that line? Okay, so I'm using Vim as my editor, and what you're seeing here on the side is the git blame output. And since I'm the only person who works on this project, it's all my name. But really what I'm more interested in is the stuff that shows up, like the date this was created and all of that. So I can hit enter here and go to the history in the repository and check out why I made the decision that I did. And unfortunately, I'm curious if this appears is like just me moving the code. If so, it gets a little bit harder. Yeah, it is. Okay. All right, well, let's do this a different way. Let's check out another cool feature of GitHub that I really like. You can go to GitHub and you can browse around your repository. And that by itself, okay, kind of interesting, not super interesting. But the thing that's cool is when you want to dig into history, and you have to dig into older history than whatever the last change was. So I'm looking at the same file from GitHub's point of view here, and I'm going to click on blame. And blame is going to show me essentially the same kind of output that I saw in my editor, just formatted a little nicer. The difference though is, like, when I was in the editor, this block of code you can see here corresponds to this commit. That's from 2 years ago, right? But I just mentioned just now that really all I was doing was moving this from one place to another. So it doesn't really tell me, the original reason why I created this comment. So here's the cool thing. This button right here, this thing is freaking magic. So you can click this. I mean, you can read it. It says view blame prior to this change. So it's like a time machine that just happens to go back to right before that commit. And so you get the blame from that point in the past. And so if you ever have this scenario where you need to like dig into what happened, this is a really useful tool, because now I'm at this commit right before, and Okay, here is this comment. It's still not the first one. Maybe it is, I don't know. We can look at that commit to see what I did. And yeah, this is where I added it for the first time. So it says use a common root with the client for Let's Encrypt. Okay, but here's the important part. I mentioned just a minute ago that when this started out, this was an Ember application. And I don't know why I had to do that, but, and this is reprimanding myself for not putting a better comment. That's not descriptive enough. But I needed the Let's Encrypt could only talk to the server at the same place where the Ember app was served from. So that which is the client root directory. I don't know that that's true anymore, especially because I don't think that, well, let's think through that. That's not terribly important, but the point is like, I'm pretty sure that this comment, this might be a scenario where this comment is now lying to me. Maybe it's not, but that's what I'm speculating. So we've got to get back to where we were. And so what we need to deal with now is we need to make sure that this location well-known Acme challenge still works. That's important. So let's take a second to talk about how Let's Encrypt works. Notice here, in fact, I think, is this the only place Acme shows up? We have two of those blocks, but they're different domains. Okay. Look at the port. This port is important in this scenario. This is port 80. Port 80 is HTTP, no S. So when a browser or anything wants to connect to my server and wants to connect over HTTP, the default port is port 80. So what happens with Let's Encrypt is Let's Encrypt really cares that when you're issuing the command, you are the one that owns the domain. That's really all they care about. In older certificates, you could do all sorts of extra stuff, like proving that not only do I own the domain, but here's my address associated, like all sorts of crap that you could give you different verification levels of how valid your cert is. And Let's Encrypt said, no, we don't care about any of that. We just care, do you own the domain that you're asking for a certificate for? So in order to prove that, you have to be able to serve traffic at just a unsecure location, port 80, and do it in a well-known format. And so when the Let's Encrypt tool runs, and let's put them side by side so we can actually check this out. Let's get them side by side. Okay, so when this Let's Encrypt cert tool runs, it sends off a request to the Let's Encrypt service, and in order to do the validation that you own the domain that you're asking for right here, which is replaced with variables, but you can think of, in this scenario, these highlighted lines would be something like collegeconductor.com. Let's Encrypt will come back to your live running server, and it will make an unsecure request, and the path that it will specify would be something like collegeconductor.com/.wellknown/Acme challenge. This path is very much, it's not a random path, even though it looks like really silly, using Acme. But it is a well-known name that Let's Encrypt is looking for. And this route will come back and say, provide just a generic 200 response. Okay. And that is enough to prove to Let's Encrypt that you own the domain. From there, they will then say, okay, you proved that you own the domain. Here's the certificate. We're going to store your certificate. We're going to send it over to you and store it where you specify, which is in this web path root. All right. Hopefully all of that makes enough sense to you. So that explains kind of like how you get certificates. And so what we need to do is move this root area so that the certificates get stored somewhere else. So we need to think a little bit about like what is an alternate location that we can use that will be correct for this. And once we solve this, then that removes the need for front-end path, and that's one hook that gets us closer to removing everything that the clone depends on. And let's finish this off. So let's prove this. So we're in staging right now, and if you I might have mentioned this or I might not have, the only time that this certificate stuff gets created is on this line right here, which is saying if you're the deploy is the production environment. So staging is not going to have this data. So let's go to the actual machine where this is running and check out what's there. So if we come over to serve conductor, it's the same thing. And if we do an ls on front end, there is, why is that not showing what I thought it would show? I thought it would show some extra files that would be available. I am kind of confused by this. You know what I'm doing? I'm conflating. So the actual certificate files get stored somewhere else. Where do they get stored? I think Let's Encrypt has a default area where they put them. So it's something like Etsy Let's Encrypt. Yeah. So it's got a bunch of stuff in here, and you can see that I've got college conductor, and these are the private files that are required in order to actually make the web server be secure. All of those things get used together to make it all happen. So I'm a little puzzled on what client root is actually doing here. I thought I understood it, and I apologize for explaining that and maybe not really understanding what's going on. Let's check it out. So let's search for Let's Encrypt web root path. Everybody makes mistakes, right? So what should web root path be? Well, that's a good question. Oh, this is a forum. That's the directory where all the files of the website are residing. Well, I don't know that that's true. Go read the actual docs, not some forum. Okay, this is feeling a lot better. To replace web root path with the area where Nginx would serve from. I think I'm liking that a lot more. While we're here, it was, yeah, user share nginx HTML. Is that where stuff is? Maybe that's just a single file that it's okay serving. And like if I cat that file, what is it? I think it's probably the default site. All right, that's probably okay. So what I want to do is switch this. Because I think all it's trying to do is like verify that what's going to be there is a file that I can reach and access and get a good request in order to do the check that you own the domain. So let's change client root to be user, what was that path they just said? User share nginx HTML. And I don't want a slash, which is good. All right, how are we going to verify this? First thing I want to do, I want to get rid of this comment that's misleading. There's another one down here. Okay, so now the challenges are just like purely saying, here's the client root. And the only reason I'm keeping it as a variable is because it needs to be used in two separate places. It needs to be used by this template, and it needs to be used by this task. Otherwise, I just say, okay, it's fine. Who cares? Now, checking this is going to be a real pain in the butt because the certificate directory is like active certificates. And so I could take the site down. That could work. And, that way this, and then remove this directory. And then this check would work and it would actually run this certificate command. I don't want to do that. That's a bunch of conditions that are lame. So how can we test this? What is root domain? Okay, root domain for production is exactly what I would speculate, collegeconductor.com. Okay, client domain is the www version of that. So I'm trying to piece together what is the command that I could issue to try this out if I wanted to. And is that a worthwhile way to test this? I want to say Let's Encrypt also has a like dry run command, maybe? Yeah, okay. So maybe we can attempt this so that we don't mess up anything that's for real. So we're on the server. I'm going to just simulate this whole command that would run to see if it actually is okay with that. I got to deploy first though. So not the greatest, but I'm going to make a speculative change that this new path of user share nginx HTML is going to work for Let's Encrypt. I'm going to deploy that, which will restart nginx and have client root be exactly that. Then from the production server, I'm going to issue this real command with all of the values filled in. But I'm going to add the dry run option to because I already have certificates, so I don't need to trigger a real thing. I think that's the process that I need to go through. Okay, so let's get out of here. The only thing that I've changed so far is some playbook stuff, so I don't actually have to commit. So we will do a make deploy. And we can also verify that the change is what we think it is on the other side, because we can look at the configuration file that was stored on the server and see that it's the value that we want. This takes a minute or two. It's not too long. Nice part about having Ansible is that deployment is a one-click or a one-command operation. There's really nothing to add from my side. It doesn't require any extra input from me. Which means that conceivably, if I had enough faith in the tools, I could do a continuous deployment process where after every commit, it would go ahead and do a release, which would be pretty cool. Maybe I'll do that someday. I think I need to replace one of my components though, because there's one of them that gets a little flaky, and when it's flaky, the service comes down. That's supervisor D. For some reason, it just, if you don't wait long enough between the stopping of the service and the starting of the service, it will actually just fail on some weird locking issue. But that's a different issue for a different day. All right, so let's go back to our server, and I'm going to now check on Etsy, Nginx, and this is going to be sites available and conductor. Okay, so now we can see it. Here's the completed template with all the values filled in. And you can notice that client root has been replaced by user share Nginx HTML. That's what we want. So while we're here, we can come over and do user bin let's encrypt, and the command is cert only, and the flags that we need are whoops, what is that? That is totally something different. We need web root, email, and agree to the terms of service. And the option that I want to make sure I put at the beginning of this was dash dry run. Okay. And then we want to say the web root path is that same path of user, what was it? User share Nginx HTML. And the domains are collegeconductor.com and www.collegeconductor.com. Okay, I think that's everything that's needed in order to test out if our certificate fetching process would work. No, I don't want to share my email address. Sorry. Cert not due for renewal, but simulating renewal for dry run. Okay, it did the challenge. Ah, cool. Try run was successful. So it did the challenge for both domains. So let's look at this for a second. So here's the client root domain, client domain. So that's the www domain. So the server's listening on port 80 at that domain. It's also listening on root domain, which is just collegeconductor.com. So, and then the challenge exists on both. They're both pointing at the same Nginx HTML directory location. So I don't know if it tried to put something there or what it was doing exactly to verify that. The flow might be that the Let's Encrypt tool stores a temporary file with some kind of ID there that then Let's Encrypt the service can go to the challenge location and see, did you have the value that we stored there ourselves? Kind of confusing and circular. Or not circular, but it's just sort of a not super clear process. But the fact that we've got some very clear messaging that the dry run was successful gives me confidence that the change we made is correct. So let's bail out of there. So what do we do? We replace this front-end path thing. We changed client root to get rid of this front-end path and clean up a couple comments. So now that we've done that, front-end path I don't think is used anywhere. Yep, except where it's defined. So we can kill this line right there, which is good. That's one thing that we needed to get rid of. So let's go back to app path, which, if you remember, was the whole thing that started this. We're trying to get rid of all of these instances where app path is used because that's the clone that we're trying to totally get rid of. Okay, and since that was a good change, let's go ahead and commit it. So we're going to say change client root for Let's Encrypt challenge. And this is for the issue that we're working on, which is 380. Cool. So next on the list is to keep digging at this and figure out why is app path being used. So the first place is the variable where it's defined. The second place is actually getting info. What's it doing here? This role is also, it's also trying to do, it needs this get info for the same reasons. Like it has to notify roll bar of which commit was deployed. So I'm going to have to do this twice. So we're going to need to get that commit that we're going to deploy, but we need to not get it from the repo. We got to figure out a different way to do that. So that's one area that we have to fix. But I'm trying to get anything like lower than that first is my priority. And this should not be hard-coded. Oh, this was a note to myself to clean up what app path is used for later. At this point, I don't think that I'm going to follow through on that one. Let's just get rid of that comment. So the deployment is totally not using the clone anymore. And no part of it cares about the clone. So anything that's related to helping run the site from the clone is not needed. And that's what this task is. So this is the way that I add secrets of various configuration file stuff or keys to connect to various services. All of these things get stored in this secrets file that's generated from a template. In fact, we were actually just looking at that template. You can see it's a bunch of Django settings that are pulling secrets from a vault file that I can't show you because that would mean I'd have to rotate all my keys, which I'm not going to do. But this is the override stuff that is actually needed for production if it wants to do real things like talking to Google, talking to the database, talking to Rollbar, and so on and so on. Okay, so that's stored for here for the actual like places where the app is running today. That's here. I duplicated that step because I needed it in 2 locations as I was doing this transition. So this side where it's doing it for the clone and where app path is used is no longer needed. So I can get rid of that task entirely. So let's ditch that. And let's get our list and see what's left. So what do we have? We've got this place where we needed a git revision, which we still have to figure out, and a task to create the directory, which we aren't going to need to do in the future. So this can go away. And so now we're really just left with this core problem of we've got to get the git SHA in order to do deployments, but we want to do that without doing a local clone. I don't know how to do that off the top of my head. We could, well, I say that. There are lots of ways that we could do it. I can think of at least a handful. And the question is, does Ansible have a way to do it without doing a clone? That's what I want to figure out. So let's look at the git, what do they call them? The git module. Yeah, they call them modules that Ansible uses. So this is a way that Ansible wants you to interact with the git tool. And this is how you can do clones. This is how you can do all sorts of stuff, as you can see. So we're just looking for the ability to ask for the latest commit. That's all we want. This is something that should be possible from a git command line if we need to. Essentially I'm thinking of, well, I don't know exactly what command I'm thinking of. Git remote latest commit. What's that going to show? Maybe git remote is not a good name. Git list latest commit on remote. Because there is a way to get a quick like SHA of it. And I want to say it's called git short something. Short log? No, that's not what I was thinking of. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank, but it doesn't really matter. There is a command you can issue that will give you the latest SHA of a repository. I think the problem with that command, though, is it's designed only if you're actively in a clone. Git really likes to work from clones. So the challenge is, like, how do we issue the same kind of command, but say, hey, go look over there at this thing over on GitHub.
Here are some details.
Wow, Google is listening to me apparently. So, how do we list a remote? Git list remote history. There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to query for this. well, importantly, there's got to be a way that doesn't involve you having a clone in order to do it. Because, like, look at this command. They're saying, do a git log, but they're just using a shorthand syntax for, assuming that they already have a repo to work from, so they know where the origin is and all that stuff. I'm looking for something like, and just to make sure that we're doing it from someplace that it definitely does not have a repository, we'll do it from my home directory. So I'm looking for something like git log, and then the actual URL of my repo, which is over here. This is what I'm really looking for. And see, it says like, I don't know what this is. I don't know. You're not a repository. I don't know how to do that. So let's see, are there options that we could pass it? And if you're in the chat and I'm definitely willing to take input on this, because I assume it's possible, but I don't actually know how to do it at the moment. List remote branches, git remote. Let's see what this documentation says. Now, again, this is about like a clone, because this is if you wanted to add a remote to an existing repository, which is really not what I'm looking for. Git. I want to say it might maybe revlist or revparse. Check out revlist. That sounds like a good option. It's just got absolutely junk help here. Maybe that's the short help. List commit objects. That's kind of close. I actually think that might be where you get the short SHA from if you have a clone. Again, how do you do it remotely? How do you point to something that is not local? Well, let me stare into flags for a while. And this is sometimes the reality of software development. Like, you don't always know exactly what you're doing. You do the best you can until you find it. What might else be a name? Like an info command, maybe. There's some cool commands in here. InstaWeb. Who knew? Well, Google's probably going to be more helpful than me continuing to stare at a list. So we'll go back over here to the searches and see if we can find some result. Working with remotes. That sounds promising. So showing remotes, I don't need to do that because I don't want to do a git clone. Adding remotes, I don't want to do that. Inspecting a remote. Okay, can I actually run git remote? Will that work, or is it? Yeah, again, not in a repository. So it does want to do that. Okay, so that command's not helpful. Or not what I want, anyway. It's helpful for plenty of other things, but not what I'm looking for. Get ready? What is that? All right, let's try get SHA without clone. That's really what we want, right? Hey, here's a promising one. Ah, ls remote. Okay. So get ls remote. What's the help on that? All right, let's get the longer help. Because I would like to get this SHA down to like a one-liner so that we don't have to do a bunch of extra parsing. So if it has a way to say, here's the latest commit of master, or using stuff to specify which branch you're interested in, that's going to be the most useful thing. But it doesn't look like it has a super exhaustive. Well, I guess it has refs, so we can. It says when unspecified, all references. So we might be able to pass it in a command that is like the reference that points to the master branch. So let's do that. Let's go over here and do get ls remote, and because I don't want to be depending on SSH at all here, I really want to make sure that this can just work without any kind of prompting, because this is a public URL, so this should be accessible and not need any kind of extra stuff. So I'm going to use the HTTPS version of this and see what it shows. Okay, so we've got listing here, a bunch of pull requests, and refs heads master. So what happens if we change this to add refs heads master? All right, that's the thing that we need, is this value right here. We might have to massage it a little bit. Well, we definitely do, because it's got two values, so we're going to need to do some kind of splitting on the output if we want to use it as the command directly. So before we do that, though, let's look at the Git module. Now that we know what we're looking for, we're looking for ls remote, and if they don't, this is the trouble with Ansible. Is like it can't cover every feature. It's trying to hit the features that you would use the most, like clone, or is definitely something that you would care about. The ability to do that. We are clearly off the beaten path at this point. Asking for the latest commit of a repository without actually doing the clone itself is, I don't think, a very common operation. So I'm going to guess that we're not going to find it in here, which means we're going to have to go to a shell command, which is totally okay. Ansible has the ability to do shell commands. So we need to figure out what that shell command needs to be, though. So we definitely want the refs master. That's the right thing. That's what I deploy on, is the master branch. So that's going to be the right commit. And let's look at that help one more time, see if there's any way to get just the commit. If so, then we could have it very easily. But if not, that's okay. We can then pass it to either cut or sed or some command like that to do, like pipe it to that to get just the value that we care about. I mean, here's all the options, and that's it. That's the whole command. So we're not. It doesn't look like that's there. And as an aside, maybe what happens if we do -H, because that was the heads option. Oops. Oh, apparently nothing that I want. All right, well, we'll stick with this then. So now the other way, the other thing we have to do is think about how to get that first piece. I think we can do this with the cut command. And if we ask for a delimiter, all right. So I'm gonna, instead of continuing to hit GitHub over and over again, I'm just going to do an echo on what's the output so that we can simulate this. So we've got echo now, and it's just like if we had the command output. Although it's looking a little funny. What's going on there? Why? Curious about this indentation and like wrapping. That's really weird. I would not expect some of that. What are you doing there? This is echo. It's like we don't need, or maybe I want, is it cat I want? No, cat's for files. That's not gonna work. This is really weird output. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, it's a tab character. Ooh, even better. Okay. So I think the default delimiter for cut is the tab character. So if we say cut F0, no, all right. I don't use cut often. It's a useful Unix tool. It's a way to cut out chunks of output and grab a part of it, but I don't remember. I need an example. So like here's an example of getting stuff out of Etsy password. So I was close with the -F option. Okay. Maybe it's 1. There's some really weird output behavior going on here. So let's go back to because echo's being weird. Let's try to pipe it to cut F1. Perfect. Okay. I don't know what was going on with echo. Doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do is run this command. It's a shell command. And pipe it to cut F1, which should give us our SHA. This SHA is then, we'll register that in an Ansible task, and that should replace our need for this stuff over here. All of this should go away, I think. So for the moment, I'm going to just comment it out as a quick reference, and we'll create our new task. Now we're finally making some progress. Feel better about this. We're stuck there for a little while. And we'll say get the latest SHA from GitHub. And we need to be the root user to do this stuff that we want to do. Ansible, is it shell or command? It's shell. Okay. Let's get an examples, make sure we're doing it right. Because we need to be able to pipe stuff as well. And if Ansible doesn't like it, we'll make a little script. That would be a fine too, but hoping to avoid that. Pipe example. Okay, it looks like shell can handle that, no problem. So the simplest form is really just shell followed by the command we want to run. So the command is git ls remote. In fact, let's copy it from over here because that's exactly the command that we need. Okay. And that's the command, and then we want to register that output. And we'll call it, I guess we'll call it get SHA. So that's the value. So by listing this, we have got the SHA that we used to get from the clone. We're getting it from running this command directly. And I need to replace where get fetch is used with this get SHA value. So anywhere get fetch exists, we need to find it, and wow, that's all messed up. Hold on. Okay, so let's change this whole thing to get SHA. Oops. Okay, so that's changed all of the values there. If this is working as we hope, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, then we've effectively replaced the clone, which is great. I still have to do it for the load balancer that we had earlier, so we're not quite done, but I think that's enough to test out this deploy on the staging server and see if it blows up or succeeds. So in order to run the staging deploy, I'll run vagrant provision, and we'll know just in a moment if I get that shell command correct or incorrect. And again, if you have any questions about this process, or just want to ask any other Python or Django questions, we're kind of deep in the weeds of deployment, but I'm happy to answer other stuff. The chat's open, just don't be a jerk. If you want to lurk too, that's cool with me. Happy to keep chugging along here. It failed. Why did it fail? What is it complaining about? Because this is at this S3 step. Oh, wow. Okay. So when I registered the output, it put all of that stuff into a data structure. So this is pretty amusing because you can see it here. Key apps conductor dash, and then everything from here to here up to this .pyz thing is what I thought was going to be the SHA. I was wrong. It stored all of that output into a single thing. So what I really need to do is get this thing out of there. So it worked. Well, sort of. It worked in the sense that it got the value that we want, which is the 297 blah, blah, blah stuff there. The problem is that the thing that I registered that I thought was just going to be the output value, I was wrong about. So we need to get out a single value from that standard outlines. So let's do another query. Ansible read standard outlines. There's probably an easy way to do this. If not, we'll access it like the way we want to. Oh, is there also a standard out? Ah, there is. We can just use standard out. We don't need standard out lines. There's they have a string value of it as well. So we just need to reach into this thing and call standard out instead. So any place where I have get SHA, we need to change it to get SHA standard out. That's really what's required. Okay. Let's try it again. I think we'll be more successful this time. That's promising. It actually seems like it's going to fetch something, and it did. Cool. So I think that worked. I think it worked exactly the way that we wanted it to. Okay, great. The rest of that stuff we can ignore for the time being. Let's go back to looking at app path. So this means that we can now successfully remove the clone. And now we're down to just this little blob for getting the remote from GitHub, or getting the latest commit from GitHub from the master branch. So the other place that we need to do this actually, so I've got this separated into multiple roles. If you're looking at the bottom of my Vim output here in the quick fix window, I've got 3 instances of this app path. I just deleted the one that was in this web role, but I also have this load balancer thing. And yeah, I even have a note. This is probably not the best place for this, but whatever. So we're gonna copy that SHA again and get rid of app info here. And notice it's calling, here it's registering it as get info. It's not what we want. Whoops. So this will become just like the other example. So we're gonna change this to get SHA standard out. I think that brings our app path down to just where it's defined, which means that it can go away. Let's do another deployment. this is like the end-to-end of this. And whoops, I didn't spell that right. If this works, then we'll have successfully removed the git clone from the entire deployment process. And frankly, that would bring the end to this whole milestone. I've got, while that's running, go check that out. I still got this one from last week. I did check on it. I have some permission thing that is too boring to even worth streaming, so I'm going to fix this up. But you notice there's only these two issues here. So if we go through this, oh yeah, there's all sorts of stuff I can do here that I'm forgetting about, neglecting. Add test copy settings file. Oh, there's others. Is there other stuff that is needed? Now I'm curious. Am I going to get myself in trouble? No, the secrets should be okay. Okay, I wasn't thinking that through when I wrote this task or that issue down. The secrets is actually coming from a template from Ansible. It's not coming from the repository, so this one's wrong. That all market is done. So we did this remove the git clone. There are other things on here that I forgot about though. So we successfully killed off the app path. It's gone. But there are other bits of this. Part of having a clone managed process was that in order for the server to even connect to the repository and pull it down, I needed to either have a password stored in there or an SSH key to talk to GitHub to get the repository. Both of those carry with them security risks. So if my server was ever hacked, somebody could take my SSH key, they could navigate to that directory, and then they could start basically masquerading as me, by having that SSH key. So what I can do in this process is now I can go and remove that SSH key from the Ansible stuff, which is in here somewhere. We can dig that up. I can remove it from my vault, which I can't show you, but it's just a matter of deleting something from a YAML file. And then I can also delete that stuff from GitHub. Like GitHub lets you manage SSH keys, and I can, since it won't be necessary anymore, I can actually delete it and deactivate it and say, like, I really don't want to use this anymore. I don't want anybody else to be able to use it anymore. So all of that stuff is not particularly exciting. So I don't think I'm going to bother showing that on stream. Yeah, here it is. You can see it right here. So we've got the SSH private key, which is coming from my vault. The directories that to do that SSH stuff. Yeah, I'm going to delete these, and then I'm going to delete the key. And that's going to be the end of it. So I'm going to do that probably after the stream because we're kind of running long. And next week, we'll move on to something else. I have some ideas in mind. One of the things that I'm doing right now that, as I was going through this process, we're bundling static assets and the application separately in CI. And then during the deployment, I'm pulling down both the static assets and the application at the same time. And they have to work together. Like they're pretty tightly coupled. They expect to be the same static assets that the app is going to use. That coupling, I don't like it, frankly. or the fact that I don't have any problem with the coupling existing. My problem is that they are two separate things, and if one of them fails, the other, or if one of them isn't there, the other one's going to fail, which isn't good. So what I'm thinking of doing is, instead of serving static assets like, and when I say static assets, I'm referring to CSS, JavaScript, image files, font files, anything like that that doesn't change, static, is being served directly from Nginx right now. There is a tool called white noise that will let you serve that stuff efficiently from Django. And it probably won't be quite as fast as Nginx, but it will give me the advantage of putting all the assets into a single bundle, so that really what I deploy is a single file. So in fact, let's consider this milestone still open. We'll add a new one, and we'll say use white noise for static assets. And if you see you might even notice the cute name here. White noise is another name for static. So that's your hint that white noise is all about static assets. So I think that'll be our topic next time. If you enjoyed this, thanks for the follow, Mohammed. Appreciate it. If you enjoy this, give it a like, give it a follow if you can. I will post this content on YouTube if you want to review anything later. I think I'm Matt Lehman on YouTube, but I have links and stuff. You can check out my website above, and I will pretty regularly. In fact, I've got you're here, you're watching, so I'll just show you. On my website, I have this building SaaS section where I post show notes, so that here's last week's. You can see some of the commands that I ran and all that stuff. Thank you, Fabricio. And I will try and make sure that this information is complete, has some information about what we did tonight, so that you can refer back to it if you need to. And if you missed anything I said, maybe I'm talking too fast and English isn't your native language, whatever, you can go back and check out it again. Also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, ask me questions on Twitter, I'm available there too. So with that, I'll bid you good night. Take care.